All right, Kev, here we go. We're back. The Wait for It Seattle podcast. I think we have, I've been selling the podcast a little bit, so we got some listeners that might not read. Not like in general, like
Yeah.
they read like books and magazines, but not our Substack. So I wanted to make sure everybody knows the Wait for It Seattle podcast is affiliated with SeaTown Sports, and our you can find us on Substack, writing all kinds of things.
Yes. Yeah. And what did we have? We're counting down the top 100 Seattle sports athletes.
Yep.
We've kind of alluded to it on the podcast, but to actually get to the meat of it, we're already 100 through 50
Yeah.
on 100 through 51 on the website.
Yep.
And it's created all sorts of debate.
Oh yeah, we've gotten texts from people who are just like, "I love you guys, but you are absolutely wrong." One of which will be a guest later for us. We didn't talk to him about it on. We'll talk about other things, but we have people who read every single part of it. I think it's fun. Rankings are always fun. Everybody loves a good rankings debate. It wasn't easy. It was a lot of work by us, and
No, not at all.
we probably are wrong on some parts. But you know that's part of having your own Substack. You get to make those decisions. So we also have some. We're doing a lot of Husky football game previews for their Big Ten opponents. We're also doing Seahawk positional previews. I started writing about the offensive line. Not excited about that part. A little worried. So that'll be coming this week. But we're just having fun writing about sports, talking about Seattle sports, getting excited. So we
This is his way of not bringing up the Mariners.
oh Kev. Uh God, thank God they won today. Speaking of the Mariners, and a lot of people, it's basically like a family chat on
Substack.
our Substack today. But one of the people we want to shout out, we might have a sponsor someday. We're pretty big time, but we're gonna make a sponsor. We're just gonna shout out Jim Pullen, one of our loyal listeners. And if you have any real estate needs, you're gonna go to Jim Pullen. You're gonna Google Jim Pullen, Pullin. You're going to find he was a national championship Texas swimmer, University of Texas, and then also he can help you with your real estate needs. So that's what we're doing.
There we go. Our first
Yeah,
shout out, our first reverse sponsor.
yeah. That I don't think we're doing the business here, right? But that's okay. That's okay. We're gonna jump into it. We got a new segment, a little different. We're gonna mix it up a little bit. Kevin, I'm gonna ask you some questions about what you're more excited about.
Yeah.
So the segment's basically called "Is Kev more excited?" All right, Kev, first big picture. Are you more excited for Husky football or Seahawk football?
I'm a Husky fan, first and foremost. And so I'm excited for Husky football. I'm on a group chat, a group text message thread. And yesterday someone texted the thread and said, "Do you guys ever just watch highlights from random 2023 Husky games to just be happy again?" And this was after the Mariners had lost again. And I said, "Yes, absolutely. I was watching the Sugar Bowl highlights for the 20th time. So, yes, I understand the team is completely different, but oh my gosh, I'm so ready to just get over the 1 week that was just horrible, which was the national championship loss. 3 days later, Kalen DeBoer leaves. And then, like, the entire team leaves, either via transfer portal or through the draft. And now we have Jetfish, we have Will Rogers, and we have no idea what to expect. Kind of like the Seahawks, right? And I'm guessing you're more excited about the Seahawks.
I am. I want to say one thing about the Huskies that's fascinating to me. If you really think about it, like Kellen DeBoer leaving, coming off a national championship, losing what would they lose, like 22 out of 24 star or whatever,
Yeah.
20 out of 22 starters, including all the skill positions. For there to be as much excitement, not only in your voice, but in so many Husky fans and Seattle sports fans for this team is remarkable. It's
Yeah.
remarkable that Jed Fish was able to do this.
Yeah.
And I think the Belichick name helps. I think the Carroll name helps. But even nationally, I mean, you've tweeted some stuff from national people. Like people are like, "Are we sleeping on the Huskies?" So I
Which is incredible.
it's incredible. I was probably a month ago not excited at all, and doing this and previewing games and just reading stuff. I am excited. I'm excited to see what they are, but you hit it. Like, I am pumped for the Seahawks. Like, I haven't been this excited for a Seahawks season in a long time. And it's, I think change sometimes does that, right? Like,
Yeah.
Pete Carroll's the greatest. We can have this debate, but Pete Carroll is the greatest coach in Seattle sports history. Um, I value what he brought. Like, a Super Bowl championship is remarkable, but it was stale to me as a fan. Like, I'm not even talking about for players and whatever. It was stale.
It gets there, right? It gets there after a certain amount of time. I think
Right.
Lorenzo Romar, greatest Husky hoops coach ever,
Totally.
got
Yeah.
a little stale at the end, right?
Yep. And so I'm excited. I'm watching preseason. I haven't watched preseason in 3, 4 years. Part of it's so I could write about it and talk about it, but I'm also like, I'm in the nitty gritty, man. I'm watching Derek Hall reps on YouTube. Like, I'm excited. The
So
defense really has got me
the
juiced.
the defense gets you juiced, but relatedly, Ryan Grubb left the Huskies and went to the Seahawks. So if you had
Yeah.
a good time watching the Husky offense last year, just imagine if you had grown professionals in that offense, and we're actually going to see that happen. I have no idea if it'll
Yep.
be as good. But watching the game last night, Sam Howell throwing a fade to Aesop Winston,
Yep.
and I was like, that I've seen that play like millions of times.
Yep.
It's Penix to Odunze, so I'm excited.
So, build off of that, Ryan Grubb. Are you more excited, Kev,
Yeah.
for Will Rogers or Geno Smith?
Ooh, I think people are sleeping on Will Rogers, and I'm more excited about that because, again, I have no idea how good he is. There's game tape of him in the air raid, but this offense is a little more dynamic. I think he probably has a little more weaponry than he did at Mississippi State. And he's the most experienced college football quarterback in the country. And so you throw all those things together, and I'm excited about it because I think he does have weapons at wide receiver as well. Uh, he's only going to be as good as the offensive line, but I'm excited because he's another quarterback on the long line of quarterbacks on Mountain Lake. I think he's probably better than Jake Browning, probably worse than Michael Penix, so he's somewhere in between. Hopefully, better
Hmm.
than Jacob Eason when he was at UW.
Ooh, Jake Browning is pretty good. Jake Browning is pretty
Yeah,
good.
he was pretty
Uh,
good for the first 2 years, and then he had something happen with his shoulder, and was
yeah.
it something happened his last 2 years? But yeah, Browning body of work was great.
I think I might agree with you. Geno Smith, even though Ryan Grubb's offense excites me, like, yeah, there's a known quantity there a little bit. Will Rogers, like, I have no clue. And everybody who watches Husky practice is pretty excited about him. They're also excited about Desmond Williams is his name, right? The
Yeah,
freshman quarterback. So
Demond
Damon
Williams.
Williams, sorry.
Yeah,
The quarterback room is pretty exciting. But I want to see what Will Rogers can do because whether he's good or not is a huge part of, is this a 6 win team or a 10
or a
win team?
10-win team
Yeah.
potentially.
Yeah.
That's a huge
Um,
gap.
it's a huge gap, right? And that's college football, I think, to a certain degree. But yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, the Husky season's fascinating.
Yeah,
People are juiced. Are they gonna feel disappointed if they go 7-5 in the Big Ten? Because, like, that's not a bad year.
yeah.
But
And if they only have 2 losses, then we're all talking about they could qualify.
yeah,
They could qualify as a top 12. See, that's a very optimistic look.
yeah.
I don't know if they'll win 10 games.
I mean, the projected college football playoff, I think, has Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan all in it from this
Mm-hmm.
conference. So,
Yeah.
oh, and Oregon, sorry.
Yeah.
And then USC and some people. I mean, it's loaded. And I'm
Yeah.
also excited about that. I mean, the Big
Yep.
Ten makes me excited. So,
Yep. Yep.
let me go to a Seahawks specific question. You might not have a lot of excitement either way. Are you more excited for Byron Murphy or Reek Woolen?
After watching highlights of and a chunk of the game yesterday, after watching highlights of the first preseason game and a chunk of yesterday's preseason game, Murphy for sure. Dude can rush the quarterback. Like offensive, like I have envisioned him being on the scouting report of opposing teams and them thinking, okay, like he's gonna cause disruption. And just as a rookie, that's exciting. And we've seen great secondary players in Seahawks history. And so kind of our schema for secondary players is kind of like elevated, like off the, like it's just ridiculous, right? We had Richard Sherman, we had Earl Thomas, we had these great I've seen that before. I want to see like a JJ Watt kind of dude,
Mm.
right? Just someone rushing the quarterback, just causing mayhem. I think his ceiling's probably higher than prime Michael Bennett. Different type of player for sure.
Yeah, that's a good point. I am also with Byron Murphy. Like Rick Woolen is awesome, but I think Devin Witherspoon also could be awesome. I totally agree with you. We've seen it. I mean, I watched Cortez Kennedy when I was 13 years old win the Defensive Player of the Year, and he
Yeah.
was a force. But we haven't really seen an inside player
Yeah.
be that good.
Not a D end, which Bennett was, but someone like inside,
Yeah, exactly.
just
Like we've had
busting
guys who
through.
get sacks, but we're talking like they're double teaming him and he's shedding it. I mean, I don't want to get too hyped, but I'm geeked for Byron Murphy right now. All right, I got one more for you. How about that?
All right, let's do
No, I
it.
got two more. I got two more. It'll be quick.
Okay.
Are
Okay.
you more excited for the Seattle Sounders right now or the Seattle Storm?
Oh, you know, after our conversation, I bought MLS season pass. So
Oh,
I am more excited for the Seattle Sounders. Um, the Seattle Storm had two games,
flat.
flat games. I think that would be the best way to put it. But yeah, I understand that the Sounders have lost 5 straight games against LAFC and they play them again this week. No, the following week. They play them
Yeah,
soon, not this
yeah,
week, but they
yeah.
play them soon. But I think the Sounders always make runs around this time of year, and I don't know why that is. But I think they're going to make another run, and hopefully they can get into that upper tier and start beating teams from that upper tier of the MLS.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest critique right now is like, okay, they went on a run, but who are they beating that's good? They did beat the Galaxy in the Leagues Cup. They cannot beat LAFC. It's not even close. Um, I just hope they don't play them in the MLS playoffs, and then
Yeah,
they could go on a run. The Storm to me are disappointing. Like they are so stagnant. They came out of the Olympic break and they're running the same sets, they're running the same action. They just look the same.
and contrast that with Caitlin Clark,
The
who
Fever looked
just
like
like
a different.
incredible.
Yeah, the Fever looked awesome. Not only Caitlin Clark, their whole team, their coach came with new sets. Like they were. I
Yeah,
understand that that's a hard place to play because that arena is bananas, but it wasn't even like the
no.
Fever outplayed the Storm completely. The Storm flat is right and stagnant, disappointing. Yeah, I would rather turn on the Sounders right now and hope that they get a good Morris game and um then watch the Storm because they're just the same. They're plateauing. They're going to be a first round, maybe probably first round and out the way they are now.
Trending down, trending down.
Speaking of speaking of disappointing, Kev,
Yeah, yeah.
are you more excited for the 2024 Mariners or the 2025 Mariners?
All right. I had a listener text me, and she's not alone with the Mariners fan base. She said, please do not rip them. Don't be so negative about the Mariners. I think it's become a theme of the podcast.
Okay. All right.
And actually, this is very hard
Yeah.
because why would I be excited about 20? Why? How can I be excited about 2025 if everything's exactly the same? Right. So, the start of the week, we were like, can they hold on to the division lead? Right. In
Yeah.
the middle of the week, um, oh, can we stay in the playoff race? At the end of the week, we're like, okay, we need to fire the manager all within a week. And I don't know if, and you wrote an article that said the Mariners hit rock bottom. And there were a lot of savvy commenters on Twitter and
Yeah.
Reddit that said, no, I can go a lot.
Yes.
Deeper.
The most common response to that because you put it on Reddit and it kind of blew up. Like we had like 700 people view that. And the most common response was like, absolutely not. There's so much worse to go. This is not us. This is like Mariner fandom. Like we have experienced enough pain that, so to me, the answer is 2025. Like 2024, I don't know what to expect when I turn on the TV and I watch. I can't help it. My wife today said, "Why are you turning that on? You get so upset." And I'm like, "No, it's gonna be great." And they won 10-3. And it was, I was all happy.
Yeah.
Like Josh Rojas is hitting bombs, right? But yeah, they are inconsistent. They can't hit still, no matter what the trades are. Nobody can answer why. We could say it's the Marine layer or it's the hitting coaches or whatever. It's a curse. I don't know. Give me a fresh start 2025. I'm more excited about that.
Yeah.
They have talent on the roster coming back. They have a good rotation. I don't know. I'm gonna go 2025, but I'm gonna hope they're going to play the Dodgers. Like, who knows?
Yeah, I have no idea.
No idea. We have no idea what team's gonna show up. No idea.
Yeah.
No idea.
Anyways, that was a lot more positive than it could
Yeah,
have
that
been.
was better than normal for us. We're not gonna talk about the fact that last Sunday they were tied for first and now they're 4 games back. We're not gonna mention it. It's fine. All right. That was our segment. What is Kevin more excited for? I liked it. It was fun. Kev, we'll segue and then we're gonna talk a little bit about fantasy. It's fantasy season for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Um, think of your excitement level. What is your favorite fantasy sport? Like if you had to rank, I'm going to give you choices.
Yeah.
You got football,
Yeah.
baseball, basketball, and we'll throw in hockey and soccer just in case there's an upset.
Yeah. I go baseball. I was a really big football guy. And here's the thing, everyone has a fantasy football team.
Yeah.
And you kind of just have to have one, right?
Yeah.
Baseball, I'm the commissioner of a league that's been going on for 7 years now. And the payout's gotten bigger and bigger. We have a trophy, and people are engaged and there's trash talk and that's my thing. And people don't like baseball because it's a daily thing.
Right.
I enjoy it because it's one of these things where not only do I follow the Mariners, but I follow a group of like 20 other players, not necessarily knowing how good their teams are, but knowing how good there are. Like I can tell you Spencer Schwellenbach has had like 7 straight quality starts. I would not have been able to tell you that unless I was playing fantasy baseball.
That's pretty awesome. I actually had a great conversation with a good friend of yours this week about Lawrence Butler on the A's, who's in your fantasy league, and in having the name wrong and but who's talking about Lawrence Butler, right? That's what fantasy baseball do. I'm the commissioner of a league that a buddy of mine started. He started this league. It is a dynasty league, fantasy baseball, but it has a rookie draft. And it has minor league draft, sorry, and then it also has contracts. So we do a salary cap auction. So, for example, I have Vladimir Guerrero Jr. at $59 out of a $260 budget, and I have him for next year with that contract. So I then have to negotiate whether I'm going to trade that contract away for young talent or what
What's
it is.
your payroll? Like, what is every
260? So 260
set payroll. Okay.
Yep. But during the year you can go over. You just have to be under when the every year you start again, and you have to
shed contracts.
Sometimes you can if you take on too much, but that doesn't usually happen because people are pretty savvy and they don't give like long contracts to guys. But like I traded 3 amazing baseball players, including Rafael Devers, a couple other guys who are really good for Logan Gilbert because he has a $5 contract next year. Because I'm building for next year. Because I won it.
You're like the Mariners.
Yeah, I won it 2 years in a row, so I'm not like the Mariners.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to win it this year. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's pretty complicated. I did it once with football. It was harder, but football's the one everybody plays. And so we're going to do some rankings on the Substack. Just throw out some positional rankings for people. I mean, you can get them anywhere you want, but we got a loyal fan base.
Yeah. And there was thought put into this, right?
Yeah.
So not saying there's not thought put into every other fantasy thing, but it's not made up.
Yeah.
So I would trust it.
Yeah.
It's all about marketing efficiencies, as we'll learn later on.
Yep. Yep. So Kev, you are in a fantasy football league of mine
Yes.
that I'm in, so that's exciting.
Yeah.
When you talk about fantasy football, everybody's getting ready for the draft. What's your general strategy in fantasy
Yeah.
football?
It's changed over the years. I think at one point people started realizing quarterbacks were being under undervalued. So the conventional knowledge back in the day when running backs were a little more durable would be like load up on get your first running backs. And so that was like my general strategy for such a long time, and then play the waiver wire hard. And I think that's just the key for all fantasy
Yeah.
sports. Like just win the waiver wire because honestly, the draft, I would say, like I argue the first half of the draft is relevant. The back half, if you look at your team, if you played the waiver wire right, usually like half your team's gone for the
Yeah.
draft. And so that's so first point is I will draft a quarterback early if I think there's value. Second point is play the waiver wire hard. And I guess were you asking my draft strategy or just general fantasy football?
It's just general. I mean, I don't want you to give up.
Yeah.
We haven't drafted yet, and I'm
Yeah.
in the league with you, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
quarterbacks are the thing that people differ the most, right? Some people are going to go, "Hey, I want Mahomes. I'm going to take him early."
And they score a lot of points.
They
But
do, but
quarterbacks do score a lot of points.
the variance, right, between quarterbacks may not be
Yeah.
the same as your top end running backs or receivers. My strategies change over the years. I It doesn't mean I won't draft a running back early, but I have found in the last few years that running backs in particular, because NFL teams don't value them in the same way,
Yeah.
that there's just guys on the waiver wire who end up having 1,000 yard seasons. Like
Yeah. You
it's
gotta pick them up. But
no,
it's so I've found it so hard because most leagues now implement some like kind of like a free agency like dollar amount that
yeah,
you get. And I'm in another keeper league where you get 100, and let's say a top tier running back goes down, so then you're spending people, you could spend up to like a good amount, like $75 on a guy that now will start for X team, right?
yeah,
And it's a gamble, but maybe you had just lost,
right,
right? Like your top dude, and so it is worth it.
yeah.
Or it could not be worth it because they end up sucking and then they put it in the third string. Like it's a difficult thing.
That was the other thing I was going to ask you about. So I have a couple friends, who argue that the the free agent acquisition budget fab that you get on waivers,
Yeah,
$100 for the year, is dumb, and you should just do like reverse standings waiver wire order.
absolutely not.
Yeah, I don't think so either, because
Yeah,
I am always an advocate for anything that involves more strategy. I just think
yeah,
that's what makes it fun.
yeah,
So with the dollar amount, like you said, let's say, God forbid your starting running back who's number 2 overall blows the ACL in the first week, you might spend 75 of that 100 on the backup. It's
yeah,
somebody else might value that at $2. It shouldn't just be that you suck and you're in last place, so you
yeah,
get the best player on the waiver wire. Like, what are we
yeah,
doing?
yeah. And I think we have the wrong person on this podcast. Christine, my wife, has won her league I think 2 years in a row. And her strategy is to ask Kevin like the night before the draft one,
Yep.
or um during the free agency pickup period after Monday, who she should drop and pick up. And she gets that from me, just like half thinking, right? And not actually when I do it, I'm like pulling up
Over analyzing.
articles, I'm
Yeah,
like listening to
yeah,
podcasts and
yeah.
everything.
Although Christine is watching Hard Knocks as we speak, you told me,
Yeah. So
potentially,
she's gonna
potentially,
draft Caleb Williams.
yeah, potentially ruining your Wi-Fi. So we might have a little.
uh
I think his name is Colin Johnson, who had like 2 touchdowns in week 1. Christine might draft Colin Johnson. We'll see.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um, do you have a general, like, for football?
yeah,
Is there, besides Fab for waivers, do you have like a format that you wish you could play in, or is your favorite? So, for example,
yeah,
I actually love 2 quarterback leagues. I only played in I play in one that's it's been more a long-standing league with some friends on the East Coast.
Yeah.
And the strategy is hard, right? Because number one, quarterbacks are drafted way earlier because you have to have two of them. And Sam Howell is going to be owned in that league potentially. Like it's wild. It's harder.
Yeah.
I like anything that's harder. It's just
Yeah.
that's how I'd go.
So this rule change really pissed me off. The keeper league that I've been in for maybe the past 7 years now. They got rid of kickers at one point.
Oh,
And the argument was, and I think it's a reasonable argument, is that kickers are just so unpredictable.
yeah.
And there's no really skill involved. But see, that was my market inefficiency. So I look at those kicker rankings really hard week to week, and I'm pretty religious about this. And I'm going to give this try. I swap out kickers and defenses every single week. Whoever's ranked higher, I just swap them out. Maybe other people do that. Some people just stick with a defense or a kicker. Right. Like I will just swap them out. But kickers are part of the game, and I think that why are you going to take them out?
Yeah.
And it upset me. So I want to be back. I want to be in a kicker league, and I am in a kicker league right now with you. So I get that for me.
Yep. I am in a league also where they got rid of kickers. And that's the two quarterbacks. And sometimes, I don't know. I agree with you about swapping them out. I think what people love about fantasy football is that you can play it a bunch of ways. So like basketball and baseball, to your point, you have to pay attention all the time.
Yeah.
And to be good, right? And then football, you can pick up some people on Sunday morning if you want and roll for it. And Jake Bobo will have 2 touchdowns one week, and you could have him in your lineup. And in football, like 90 out of the 100 most watched television shows in the country are NFL games every year. So like people love the NFL, and so I think fantasy football is for sure what everybody wants to watch. So we're going to feed that. We'll have some rankings out. We'll talk fantasy football a little bit here and there.
Yeah.
It's not Seattle sports specific, but I think the Seattle Seahawks offense will have plenty of options this year for sure. We're gonna make a little segue from here from fantasy football to a fantasy league you've probably never played in, nor have you experienced before. And we're gonna have a guest named Michael Phillips, who came up with a league that is different than any league you've been a part of. And so he'll be up next. All right, Kevin and I are very happy to welcome Michael Phillips to the podcast. Michael Phillips may not yet be a household name to all our listeners, but it's only a matter of time. Mike, we're going to start with your athletic accomplishments. I didn't tell you we were going to do this. Starting point guard, Seattle Preparatory School, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
How many? 3 years.
2.5.
Yeah,
count it.
Went to a state championship game.
Did not win, notably.
Did not win. We can talk about that at a different time, different podcast. Mike, who off the top of your head, who's the best player you played against in high school?
Terrence Jones.
Terrence Jones, Rainier Beach.
Jefferson, Portland.
Oh yeah, I'm thinking of Terrence Williams. I'm totally mixing up my Terrence Jones. That was summer league.
Yep.
War the Border. Did I have that right?
Franklin High School.
Oh man.
Quaker Slam.
Clearly, I don't remember my days of coaching.
Did he dunk on you?
Nobody dunked on Joe Knight, so that was a fun memory.
Oh, back Jim, right?
Yep.
I do remember Terrence Jones. He was ridiculous. That's a good pull. That's not.
He was supposed to go to the Huskies too, and then he chose Kentucky. I think he had committed at one point, and then, that was a throwback name.
Well, Michael Phillips's accomplishments keep going. He was a practice player for the women's basketball team at Stanford University.
Correct.
Who is the best player you played against there?
I guarded Shine Ogumake every day.
Big time.
Oh, wow. I did not know that about. Or maybe I knew that, but I forgot.
Yeah. Was their first number one overall draft pick year.
So did the coaches yell at you?
Only if I didn't follow the scouting report, because in practice they'd tell you what kind of position you are. You'd be like, you're left-handed, you shoot threes, you don't dribble, and you crash the boards. And if you broke profile, they'd yell at you. But other than that, they wouldn't.
Did they ever tell you who you were on the opposing team, or did you ever care to
Totally.
find out? Okay.
I was Brittany Griner Baylor week. I
Oh,
had
that's
a whole
awesome.
post game, the whole thing. It was fun.
Oh, so you were in the Summer Olympics then, basically.
Yeah, basically that's who I was.
I did not know you were Brittany Griner in practice. That is amazing. That is so awesome. Yeah, so Michael Phillips is not here to talk about his athletic accomplishments, although you can see they're lengthy. He's here to talk. It's fantasy season. People are very excited about their fantasy football drafts. Fantasy football, the biggest of all the fantasy sports. People love it. You know, everybody I know is in a league. But Mike came up with a league years ago that is different than any fantasy league you've ever heard of. So, Mike, what's it called?
Called the Sports Nerds League.
The Sports Nerds League. And can you explain the basic format? And then I'll ask you some specific questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, before even getting the format, the concept comes from basically pain points I had from playing fantasy football, which is that, you know, I was a diehard fan. I'd follow all the games, I'd follow fantasy, but I found myself rooting for perverse outcomes that didn't make any sense. Like, I want the kicker to hit, I want the running back to do this, the kicker to do this, and the other team. And I found myself actually just like kind of ruining the sport in some way. So I wanted a fantasy league that has more tied to just like straight winning and losing and being more of like an actual fan of a team. And so the concept is it's derivative of some other folks. I'd talked to some other people about some kind of similar-ish ideas, but I decided to kind of make it my own and figure out what it looks like. It's an all sports fantasy league. So rather than choosing individual players on teams, you choose the teams themselves. You get 20 teams across 14 sports. That ranges from the American professional sports, big college sports, both men's and women's, tennis, golf, so individual athletes you'd select in those sports. And you get points not throughout the season, but just once per sport based on how the event is rewarded, how the sport finishes. So, you know, if you win the championship, you get the semifinals, quarterfinals, and you get kind of points for that. So the basic concept is basically that you are rooting for the team rather than rooting for these perverse outcomes. And then you get teams to root for across the entire sports landscape. So maybe you never cared about the NHL before, but now you have an NHL team that you're following through the playoffs. And basically makes it more fun from a fandom standpoint, more truly aligned to fandom.
Now, this is, I will say I am in this league. I'm very.
Have you ever won?
Of course not. No. I think you texted me like 3 years ago when I tried to get out. I was like, I got to get out. This is you and your buddies. And you're like, we need a sucker to take his money. I'm like, all right.
I won.
Kevin, I was going to get there. I was going to get there, Kev. Slow down. Kevin won the very first year, right, Mike? Isn't that right?
I think so. It was back before the league got as savvy, and Kevin was deploying some truly bizarre strategies and didn't necessarily know not a lot of smart expected value picks, but it worked out for him nonetheless. I think it was the notorious Seahawks first overall pick that led him to a championship in year one. We're now on year 12. We had the year 12 draft today, so yep. Shows you how far we've come.
Yep, and Kevin promptly dropped out of the league about 2 years later. He's one of like 2 people to drop out of the league in the time you've done it. I think
we've had very little attrition.
Yep. Yeah. This is mostly your high school buddies, some college friends. You know, it's a good group of guys. We have a great text thread that, you know, it's a 12-month text thread. You know, it usually goes silent for a month, and then
the Kentucky Derby draft.
Yeah, some championship will come up, and all of a sudden everybody's chirping in. So.
I try to do an update every so often. I mean, you know, for a while we thought this might have some commercial promise, and then you realize that it doesn't have enough like week to week set your lineup type dynamics that I think would lead to that. So it actually is more fun as just a friend group thing that we run out of a Google Doc. But it's fun because every month there's, hey, it's March Madness coming up, or hey, MLS playoffs are coming up, or Little League World Series are coming up, or whatever it is. You know that like the next round of championships and points to be awarded are kind of coming up, and who's got what team. So I send out a little update, and then some trash talking ensues every couple weeks.
Right. So Mike hit on something that's important for everybody to recognize. There are 14 sports, one of which is the Little League World Series. I think this is in some ways the best part and maybe the grossest part.
I always wanted to get that out. So I did not promptly drop out, to correct the record. It was
Oh,
like 8 or 9 years, and then law school happened. And that's when like a lot of things in a law student's life, fun things go away. And this was the first casualty of that. But anyways, the Little League World Series, the best and probably the worst of all the sports, in my opinion. Mike, why did you add the Little League World Series?
Two reasons. One, is it ethically dubious? 100%. So I get that. But the key to the year is that you need sports popping up throughout the calendar.
yep.
And the most dead time of the year is this late July, August period where you've got some WNBA midseason, Major League Soccer midseason, baseball midseason, no championships really impending, and basically nothing else going on. And we've kind of needed an event at that time period. Plus, anyone who is as sports nerdy, who's enough to be in the Sports Nerds League, has found out that that's all you're going to see on ESPN in that time period, anyways.
Yes.
So it's fun that since it's all the airwaves are showing, to at least have rooting interest. So we added it in. Do I feel great that I'm, my college years, I was at a bar and be like, hey, no, can you turn the Little League World Series on? Like Curaçao's playing. I need to see this. No. But I think it's been really useful to show some parity, and the fun part of the fun part of the Sports Nerds League is the dynamic between sports. Like, do you want to, how do you value assets in the terms of the league, and an NFL team versus a women's tennis player versus a regional Little League World Series team yet to be defined a year out.
Yeah, that's another part that we should define for listeners. So the draft took place today, and pretty much every year it's been August. I mean, maybe it's fluctuated a little bit, but drafting in August has challenges, and there's some expected value that changes, right? So we are finishing MLS, we are finishing Major League Baseball. Am I missing one that we're finishing? Those two, right?
We aren't doing WNBA this year. We subbed it
Yep.
out for women's college basketball. So just those two are ongoing.
Yeah.
Everything else we draft for is the future upcoming season.
Yeah.
And that is a challenge. There's no better time in the calendar to do it, since some
Right.
sports are happening at all times. But
Yep.
but yes, there is, as you think about what team you want to draft in, let's say, college basketball versus Major League Baseball, since we're drafting in August and the playoffs start in a month and a half, there's a little bit more certainty on Major League Baseball. So team sports that are drafting for the current season tend to go a little bit higher in the draft because you have a little bit more knowledge rather than a truly blind before the season starts kind of sport.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's a typical snake draft. People, it's always interesting to see who will go number one overall. It's not like your fantasy football league where, back in the day, an Adrian Peterson or something, it was like everybody knew they were going to go number one, or Christian McCaffrey or whatever. This is like, it could be a tennis player. It could be a Champions League team. It's typically not an NFL, but Kevin has proven it has been. The Kansas City Chiefs have gone, I think, number one overall before. We've drafted women's tennis players number one overall.
Serena Williams had a run, I think, for the first.
Serena had a run, and then Novak had a run. But yeah, it's ultimately a question of, I think it's maybe the most interesting question posed by the league, which is the volatility across sports. Who across the entire sports landscape has the most assurity that they're going to win the title next year? And that's a complicated question. That's why the first round is fun. Like, even just looking at the top picks, it's like this year on my draft board, I had South Carolina women's basketball number one, coming off back-to-back titles. Feel like a relatively pretty good chance there. Their odds are pretty good. The guy who went first took Carlos Alcaraz. Male tennis players, you average across 4 Grand Slams performance. They're usually, because it's across 4 Grand Slams, a little bit usually averages out. And Djokovic had a run, Serena had a run. The top tennis player often does. But then you can look at baseball. The best baseball team, the Dodgers, are quite good. Inter Miami has really good odds if you're an MLS fan. I ended up taking the Boston Celtics to repeat, 7th overall. But you have to basically balance that out. And then as you get farther into the draft, you have to figure out, how do I use these picks? You get 20 picks to build your team across 14 mandatory sports. You have to fill a roster spot in every one of those 14 sports, and you basically get 6 flex spots. So I can double up or triple up or quadruple up in a certain sport if I think there's good value there. but you have to fill all 14, and you don't have to start by filling your 14, then go flex. You can, pick all your flex spots up front. So figuring out how people do that, seeing what guy's going to be boring and just pick Little League World Series teams first versus who's going to be taking like big swings on big, professional teams. So it's kind of a fun balance.
And so it's a complete redraft. There's no one keeps anything from the previous year then.
Correct. No, not a dynasty league. Start fresh every season. And honestly, I think my biggest takeaway from the draft today is people have gotten smarter. There's market inefficiencies that I feel like I had and some other folks had in the league. I've tied for the most titles in the first 11 years of the league. I think I've won 4 or 3.5 because I shared one. And those market efficiencies aren't there anymore. I'm looking at my team and it looks okay, and most of the other teams look okay, and I don't feel like it's as skewed as it used to be. People have gotten smarter.
I was going to ask you, Mike, without having to reveal, I wanted to do it after we drafted because it's calendar year. None of these guys are going to remember. What are the different strategies people employ in this league? Because there's different ways you can go, right? You can go heavy. Mm-hmm. People have gone heavy Little League World Series because there's some regions that tend to historically do well. There's people who go more team sports. There's people who go heavy college. I mean, it's all over the board.
Yeah, I think, the more statistically inclined folks have run, models around sport volatility and seeing kind of like what picks have been the most indicative and predictive per sport. I can tell you, it doesn't take a lot of intuition to know that college basketball is total chaos on the men's side.
Yeah.
And those picks are therefore not that valuable because it's a kind of shot in the dark. Getting to an Elite Eight is a pretty damn good season for a college team, and that's like a long shot. And that's the pick. That's kind of assurance you need if you're going to pick a team relatively high.
Yeah.
What I will say though is people's strategies. Part of what makes it fun is everyone can look at betting odds. And the betting odds are kind of your basis of what a draft board is. Like, unlike a fantasy football draft where you can just turn it on auto draft and go to like the consensus big board, like that doesn't exist. You kind of have to build your own. So the closest consensus big board that would exist is basically, can you merge each team's title odds and guess kind of, okay, like what are their chances from there? Everyone then has their own sports they know best. Like, of those 14 sports, there's probably 7 I have very little understanding of, and I don't understand a lot of nuance. And I follow my team through those sports, but I don't really know that much about the NHL. I don't know that much in certain sports. And so almost everyone has a major bias to pick more teams and look for the extra edge in the sports they follow more. Like, I've gotten a lot of value over the years in MLS because I follow MLS more than most people in the league do. I can tell you Jackson picks 10 golfers every season, or as many golfers as he can in the flex spots. I don't think that's a smart strategy, but it's a strategy you can use nonetheless.
In fairness, he also picks Duke basketball every single year because it's just Jackson. So, yeah.
He does. I think
it's crazy because I just got a text from Jackson right now as we were recording like this part right now.
He's a big listener. He's a big listener. He'll be excited to hear you guys shout it out for his Duke.
I love it.
And his Duke basketball pick will probably be good this year because they're pretty good. Yeah,
still plus 1,000 odds, but pretty good. I think Little League World Series is interesting because there used to be 16, now there's 20 regions. So just the pool of teams to choose from, similar to like when WNBA was in it, there's only 12 teams. 8 teams get points, right? So the ratio of teams that get points you could select is important. And especially in Little League World Series, like Japan, Asia Pacific, the southern teams, so West, Southwest, Southeast, they're always the powerhouses. So a lot of teams are shrewd selectors will pick them in early rounds. Some of our more tennis inclined folks really know how to find value in tennis. So our folks who are not as tennis inclined end up picking people who are retired or about to have kids and miss most of the next season. Happens every year. So it's kind of a fun mix. I would say people's strategies used to be more and more defined. I had very much an old defined strategy of starting with like women's tennis, Little League World Series, and baseball, and then kind of spreading out from there. But nowadays, I feel like it's pretty mixed. I ended up with an NBA team in the first round, which I haven't done. I don't know ever, maybe. So it's fun to see how it's developed and kind of you look for new market efficiencies.
I talked to you last year, I think, and I was big for adding women's college basketball, and as a women's coach, I felt like I did have a little edge in the first year or two because I was watching a lot of it. And
Yep.
I noticed in the draft today, like that's gone. The
Yep.
top 5 teams were gone in the first 2 rounds. Like
Yep.
everybody was on it. So I
People
totally,
get it. People
yeah,
because we have it's not the most technically savvy league, right? I'm running it out of a bunch of Google Docs,
yeah,
but the Google spreadsheets are all available for everyone to go back and look at. And so I looked at the last year's draft and I could see the views. People have been looking at that all the last 2 years drafts a ton in the last couple of weeks because people are like prepping and they're looking at
yeah,
it. And I say last couple of weeks, mostly like last 5 days.
right.
But it's kind of fun. It's the draft is very involved. You know, it's historically been a 3 hour ordeal to get through this draft. That's totally chaos in a live draft in an Excel spreadsheet. Nowadays that's gotten a little faster, but that's the really involved part of the league. And then the rest of the league, the fun part is you leave the draft, you look at your teams, you add them to your favorites on your ESPN app or whatever sports app you use, and then you follow your teams, and then and that's kind of the experience. And you kind of text in the group chat and you follow your teams, and you know it lasts just over 12 months. We're coming down to the wire at the very end of year 11 here, right as we did this year 12 draft. And I've had a fun time, you know, following the Florida Panthers on their title run last year, or the Texas Rangers on their title run. These are things that, you know, as a Mariners Kraken fan, I don't get to experience what winning looks like. So actually having a team that goes
Or an
through and
NBA team.
wins,
Yeah.
yeah, or an NBA team,
Yeah.
like getting to ride as a genuine fan, not rooting for any weird like I need him to get X number of stats or something like that. It's just like no, I'm just rooting for this team to win it all, and just like oh cool, I like watched more NHL games than I ever had this past year because I had the Panthers and I went on this run. So it's the fun part of it.
Here's the other cool part. It's linked to that. So you're cheering for these teams, but then when you're at the bar or you're streaming a game at a wedding or at some family party or something, and someone's asking you, why the hell are you watching the Florida Panthers? Then you get to talk for 15 minutes about the Sports Nerd League.
Yeah.
And I think I've done that multiple times when I was part of the league, and everyone thought that is the coolest thing. That is the coolest thing.
It's a cool concept. I feel I came up with it myself in many regards, but as I was doing my research for the draft this year, I saw a number of posts on Reddit of people who have come up with similar concepts. I have no idea how they score these things, but people being like, "I'm looking for Little League World Series odds for an all sports betting league," and I was like, "Wait, what is this? This is maybe we're not so unique." But also I should shout out the kind of initial concept of this league came from a conversation with my then boss at the time, Sam Procopio,
Oh,
Blanchette's own.
yeah.
He had some different version of this league that he had done previously, or something that was kind of like more all sports. And I was like, oh, what if you did it this way? And I kind of took my own spin on it, added some new sports, built it in with my own friends, put it in Google Docs, and away we went.
This is awesome. Now I have something to talk to Sam about. Our kids are the same age and he's West Seattle. That's great. Let me go over the first round because I think people will be interested. They're hearing all this. They're like, okay, great. But like, what does it look like? So, Kev, this will be the first time you've heard it. This was the first round in order: Carlos Alcaraz men's tennis, South Carolina women's basketball, Inter Miami, Dodgers. I had the 5th pick. I took Real Madrid Champions League, going for the back to back. Then West Little League World Series. Mike took
Perennial Titan. Got to like the West.
Mike took the Boston Celtics. Then Man City Champions League, Kansas City Chiefs, Georgia college football, Yankees, and then Switek women's tennis. So like you could see for anybody listening, like how, you know, and is there a right or wrong? I mean, you know, Mike's got his, you know, analytics and theories, but the reality is you can go any direction you want to go. That's what's fun about it too.
And you
Yeah,
set
and
the
some
rankings
sports.
for the top 4, you know, your required stuff, but then are there rotating?
Hmm.
Do you guys rotate sports still?
Yeah, we do. We have 13. It's a 14 sport league. 13 are set every year, and we've
Okay.
rotated that 14 sport. Last year the rotating sport was the Premier League. This year it's college baseball.
Okay.
On big years we try to do like the World Cup. So next year it'll be for year 13. We'll do the men's World Cup. But we put it up to vote each year what the rotating sport is, and then we've had some commissioners stepping in to get rid of things. For a long time we had the Kentucky Derby. I eventually ixnayed that since it wasn't getting the kind of crowd engagement that we needed. So we like to iterate.
This year we had a tie for 2 sports. I proposed college baseball. We've done it before, but I brought it back up. And then I voted against it in the group chat. And then people were like, "What are you doing?" And Mike was gonna have to make a decision, and then I just flip flop my vote, Kev. And so we got
Yeah.
college baseball back.
Hopefully that does not happen at the DNC this week. We have people
Right?
changing their mind at the last second.
We don't.
College baseball is fun though, because it's the fun part of sports too, and like where things like Little League World Series and college baseball become fun is
Yeah.
you can't find that good information for it online. You have to
You're
really,
reading
really
some
know it.
Bleacher Report article written by a
Oh,
college kid.
I could tell, like, the one guy in the league was like, "Oh, like I combine my odds, and what I'm seeing, like Tennessee and Texas A&M have the best college baseball odds." And as I'm looking, I'm like, I looked at one Bleacher Report, two early top 25, and neither of them were top 10.
Yep.
And I looked up last year's results, and they both won. That was the title game last year, was Tennessee Texas A&M, and I was like, "Hey man, like I think you might be looking at like something from last year. I have no idea, but this."
Yeah.
The odds I'm seeing, and all of us are like scouring the internet, or I'm on Reddit looking at Little League World Series Insight.
I had the same reaction today about the college baseball. I was like, "Oh, that's not." Yeah, I found the way too early top 25. I think that was the only thing available for college baseball.
And all of us are just going off like whatever we can find or any insight, just choosing name your SEC school.
All right, I think I have one more question for you about this year in particular. I had a theory, and you could totally tell me I'm wrong. I thought that I don't know if it's a market inefficiency, but it's a definite change. We know it's a change. College football.
Mm-hmm.
So college football, basically, if you got to the college football playoff, your top four, you're guaranteed points for a semifinal, and then 5, 6, 7, 8 were I think the
quarterfinal, but yes,
quarter. No, in the past, right?
In the past, it's semifinal.
Yeah. So now you're going to get points if you get to the quarterfinal. So 12 will get in the college football playoff, but who gets in? There's some differences of how college football is doing it. So I took that for me, and I took a couple real long shots, but I took Liberty College football real late, and I took Kansas State as potential conference winners who could get in. I think they said Liberty would have got in last year under this format because they were undefeated. Do you see college football being different because of that, or do you think it's the same crapshoot as usual?
I do. I think one of the market inefficiencies year to year is when people don't see updates in formats and see how those change things. Like MLS changed their playoff format. I mean, they've done it like 5 times now, but each time they have done it, people think that like, oh, it's super volatile, or now it's less volatile because we're doing series. Right. Same thing college football. I think the biggest thing it changes is you can kind of think about drafting in 2 ways, especially as you get deeper and deeper in a 20-round draft. You could be drafting for upside of, can this team win the league, or can this team win the sport? Am I drafting an MLS team that I genuinely think can win, or anything, a college football team that can genuinely win? I don't think that this changes anything for that. The second approach is, am I drafting a team because I think I can sneak a point out here? Mm-hmm. I think I can actually get a point or 3, and maybe they have a good chance for a semifinal or a quarterfinal. This is like the most common in like how bad the Eastern Conference was in LeBron years.
Yeah,
everyone basically would take the Cavs or the Heat or whatever LeBron's team was, and then people would just try in the West because like the 2 are the teams that could nominally win. But if you were smart, you're like, well, I think this other team, maybe it was the Raptors, whoever it was, like this team could get to the Eastern Conference final. They have no chance of winning, but they could at least get far, and I can get a few points out of that.
One person hit on Tiger Woods in the history of the league, I think.
You're right.
Tiger Woods is a really popular pick.
Yeah, it's one of those things. So I think it changes from that perspective, because in the new college football model, the top 4 conference winners get the buys, which means they're automatically through to the quarters. So as I look at the rankings, like you could start from who has the best Vegas odds of winning the title, and you might see a Florida State or a Utah as the 12th or 13th best team in the country. But if you're looking from can I sneak a point out here, if they're the favorite to win one of the 4 biggest conferences, they're pretty likely going to get a bye and be straight through the quarterfinals.
Yep.
So to me, that means I don't think Utah can win the title, but I think Utah has a pretty darn good chance of being in the quarters or semifinal. And therefore, like I overdrafted Utah above teams like Ole Miss or Mizzou or, Penn State, teams that are probably better than them. But in this kind of format change, it's actually going to value how far you can get into that tournament.
Yep. Yep. Well, we've officially made it very nerdy. So we did it.
I mean, the name is apt, right? It's
Yep.
It takes a special sense of nerdiness to look at a playing fantasy football and say, this isn't doing enough for me. I want more.
Mike, we appreciate you coming on and talking about the Sports Nerds League Year 12 and the format. It's a lot of fun for us, for Kevin and I, obviously, but we hope people enjoy it as well. Thanks a lot, Mike.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Mike.
you guys. Thanks.
I got 5 on it.
Oh, you're getting
There
better,
you go.
Kev.
Yeah, I was practicing. I was practicing.
Yeah.
Top 5.
Top
All
5.
right. Top 5. All right. Mariners managers
Okay.
prior to Scott's service, immediately prior. So can you nail the five preceding managers before Scott's service? And this has nothing to do with why was I thinking of Mariners managers and their legacies? I have no idea. So yeah, can you name the Mariners managers before Scott's service?
This is tricky. I mean, I definitely can name some of them. I don't know if they'll
You don't have to be in order. So I'll tell you if.
Well, does Chris Negron count?
No.
Because he was an interim at one point.
How long was he the interim?
Well, not very long. Okay.
Yeah.
No, not him. Lloyd McClendon.
Yes, he was the one right before 2 seasons.
God, who was the person right before that? That wasn't. Well, Bob Melvin's one of them. No, Bob Melvin. This is farther back.
Bob Melvin was 03 to 04.
Man. Mike Hargrove?
No.
Oh,
Mike Hargrove was out after Melvin. So that's 2 strikes.
Well, I know my Mariners managers, but not the recent.
Yeah.
I already.
All right, are you ready for this?
Yeah, just tell me.
It's pretty bad.
I blew it.
Eric Wedge, 2011 to 2013. He went 213 and 273, losing record. I won't count Darren Brown. He was 50 games
that's
of
the other
2010.
interim. Yeah.
He went 19 and 31.
Yeah.
He was replacing Don Wakamatsu.
Oh, I loved Wakamatsu.
He lost as well, 127 and 147. And then we'll just do it. We'll just connect the dots for everyone since you named Melvin and Hargrove. Before Wakamatsu, we had Jim Riggleman for 90 games in 2008, and then before that we had John McLaren for 2 years.
Oh, John McLaren was loved. He was loved. He was beloved in Seattle and didn't turn out. I mean, man, that's
all losing records.
That's a who's it.
Lupinella.
Is Lupinella the only manager in history with a winning record? He must be.
Yeah. And here's what's interesting about that. His win percentage, 54%.
Oh, did you see the thing that said if the Mariners had a 54% win percentage this year, they'd be in first place? Or something like that, or over the last week, whatever it is,
yeah.
All right. So I'm going to go back to fantasy sports for you. This will be tricky. So I'm going to give you some hints for sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Fantasy football.
Yeah.
I want you to come up with the 5 best single season fantasy football seasons. That was a terrible sentence.
Yeah.
Right. So like the best
years.
I'm going to give you like year or time, and I'll probably give you the team just to be fair. And that'll be more fun for people guessing at home.
Okay. Definitely Tomlinson.
Oh, you nailed it. You didn't even need it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's number 1, 2006.
Yeah.
Let me just tell you something. He averaged 30 fantasy points per game. He had 28 touchdowns rushing. Like, that's absurd.
Yeah.
And 1,800 yards rushing. So, like, yeah, he's number 1.
This is why people drafted running backs.
Yep.
Sean Alexander's MVP season.
No, not on there. So you got
every time I name Sean Alexander, it's
wrong. Yeah. So number 2 on the list is a current 49er, but he was not a 49er when
McCaffrey.
It's McCaffrey for the Panthers in 2019.
Yeah, that was a
year. 1,000 rushing and 1,000 receiving.
Yeah.
Okay, number 3, I want you to think greatest show on turf.
Wow, Kurt Warner.
No.
Oh.
Marshall Faulk. Yeah. Marshall Faulk had an incredible year. He had 830 receiving yards, 1,400 rushing, 26 touchdowns.
What year?
4, that was in 2000. Number 4 is 2002 Kansas City Chiefs running back.
Priest Holmes.
Oh, you nailed it. Priest Holmes.
I played fantasy football, man. Yep. Priest Holmes, baby.
And then 5 is a quarterback. More recently, You got to think rushing quarterback.
Lamar Jackson.
You hit it. Yep, Lamar Jackson in 2019, actually.
Wow.
So there you go. Those are the top 5.
You'd think, man, now I want to see the top 10. Like, did Michael Vick ever break it?
No. Sean Alexander's not even in the top 10. We do have an OJ Simpson in 1975,
Wow.
which is incredible because
no one
they weren't playing fantasy football. Somebody went back and calculated the amount of points that OJ would have. So juice is loose, I guess.
We got our first OJ Simpson reference in the podcast.
We did, and we're not gonna go any deeper into that one. Let me tell you.
All right, top 5. We had a great episode today.
We did. It was great.
We had Mike Phillips, Sports Nerd League. We had fantasy content. What do we got going on this week? Well, we got we're dropping the next part of our top 100 or SeaTown Sports top 100, counting down the top 100 most all-time professional athletes in Seattle. We got some Seahawks position previews coming out.
We got the 50 through 41, and then we have Seahawks position preview for the offensive line. And then we're going to do a mailbag on Friday.
Need mailbag
so everybody
questions.
Send in your mailbag questions.
Your mailbag questions.
And we will get excited for that. And we will see everybody next week.
Thanks for joining us.